Hello, ladies. Welcome to Homemaking Radio. I hope you get a few things done while you listen today. And I'm broadcasting from one of the rooms in the guest room, and I wanted you to see my new picture that I got from a gift certificate that someone gave me. And there was a mix-up, and the lady online got it all straightened out, and so I got my picture. And it's a canvas print where they print someone's painting on a piece of canvas and then they wrap it around a wood frame. So it's 2 or 3 inches wide and it looks real. But what I really wanted just was the atmosphere of the picture and the kind of the hominess of it. So I could never have afforded the real artist's first edition, and so I'm really grateful I could get something like this. And do you think that it looks like there's an upper story in that house. Do you think there's an upstairs? That would be interesting. So we as homemakers, we have to start out our day getting prepared, getting up and getting, bathed and dressed, because it has an effect on ourselves. And I noticed it in some workplaces. They were requiring, I was reading about it somewhere, requiring their employees to be better groomed, to make sure that they were clean and that they smelled good and that they dressed well. And, and I thought, if that's a benefit to business, how much more can our taking care of our appearance be a benefit to us in our home? It makes the children and anyone that comes near you realize that you mean business, that this is an important place. And I would like to read something out of Linda Lichter's book today, because she mentions the importance of the home in Victorian times. Now that book is probably for really mature people only to read. If you know someone who's gotten out in the world and they have started getting what would you say, polluted by the world, this would be a good book for them to read, a man or a woman. It's written from a woman's point of view, because it began as a book to show how women were treated differently and how they lived differently in Victorian times compared to now. But her comparisons are pretty harsh, and also she gets quite explicit about some things. So I can't read everything to you, but it would be good for you to read it to understand the danger that we can get in unless we stay in the biblical family way of doing things. And I did mention a lot about courtship yesterday, and I wanted to read more about it today and embellish on some of the things I said so that it would not go misunderstood. But first I will cover the homemaking, because there are some things that I said that grounded me to walk through the house, to have my cup of tea, to make my list. The list is really what grounds me, because it's like my boss, and I can look at it and realize there are things on there that I need to do, and I'll just list some things that need to be done on there. And I feel that I don't always have to follow that routine, because sometimes there will be things that I need to be doing. I would like to catch up on correspondence, and I'd like to catch up on my sewing, and there are other things that have kind of accumulated or need to be gone through. And so I will maybe not do the kitchen one day, or maybe not make the beds another day, or maybe not do the laundry, just maybe once in a while, because I always make sure the day before that I'm far enough ahead that I could afford to take off from those regular jobs that ground me and do some of the other things that I would like to do. Our problem here out in Oregon is that the seasons change so rapidly. I can get started on a pair of lovely flannel pajamas for one of the grandchildren, and then by the time I get them finished, they're too hot to wear in the summer, and then the child outgrows them. So I want to spend time to really get things done so it doesn't. There were a couple of things I made for my daughter that took me a couple of seasons to even get them finished because there was so much to do in the home. And but I do think the homemaker has a right to get a little ahead and sit down and do some things she'd really like to do. If you like to sew, you would understand. So then I want to mention something that I had briefly talked about in a previous video, and it was character. And so I wrote down the different words. Character, first of all, you can have 3 or 4 different meanings to it. The Bible character are things like things that you would acquire into your heart that you can't easily change, like love, joy, peace, goodness, kindness, faith, virtue, and in one of those passages it includes the word character, and that would mean the good things that you would add to your personalities. It's possible to change things in your life that way. You're not born with character. It's something that you can learn, and the Bible teaches us to acquire it. So we have to study for it and acquire it and practice it, and that's how you get it. Any other skill, let's say you want to learn to play the piano. Who was it? Was it Elizabeth in Pride and Prejudice said, "I do not play the piano so well because I have not practiced." And so we have to practice our character. But there were other things that character meant, and one was the letters of the alphabet and the numbers are all characters. Each is an individual character, and there was a tool that people used to use to carve these characters into wood or stone or something else, and the tool was called a character, and that's where we got the word character for those things. But the tool and the characters all emphasize this spiritual character God wants us to have, because when you carved something in there, it would stay. You couldn't uncarve it, and that's what we want for our personal character. Then the other thing was character. The modern use of character is that person is such a character. They're so funny. They're so this and they're so that. Or the cartoon character, or characters in a book, or characters in a play. These are people. Probably misnamed, really. That should be a different word, in my opinion. And if you can think of one, I'm allowed to make up stuff. There's no law against changing that. So I want to read a little bit from Linda Lichter's book, and then talk to you a little bit what I talked about previously, so that you didn't miss my meaning. And so with Linda Lichter's book, she talks about the home. I talk enough about homemaking here, and you can get all the information you want on the web or in other books on housekeeping tips and homemaking tips and how to save money, and there are plenty of people that are willing to write about being frugal and things like that. So everybody has their own way of doing things, but for this purpose, I am more into the character and running the home as a beautiful place that you'd rather be more than anywhere else. And so many people, and I find myself doing this too, it gets to be out of control and so much work to do that eventually you just want to go somewhere else. But my goal was to make it so that I wouldn't want to go somewhere else. And one of the ways that I got it certain places to higher standards was I would just become a different person and just say, all right, I'm here to straighten these people out and clean up my own house and my own mess. But I also listen to audiobooks, which it just seems like the time goes by faster. And this one that I'm listening to recently, I noticed they were doing, it's a pioneer setting, Wild West, I think it's Montana, but there was a girl who was peeling potatoes, and she asked someone else, could you read to me out of one of your books while I peel potatoes? That would be just so wonderful. The work would go by so fast. Well, that was similar to the way I had my children read to me while I had to do something that was important in yet I didn't want to just emphasize homemaking over their learning, so they would read it to me. And the other thing that we would do is we had some old church hymn books, and we would go around the homestead singing as many verses as we could, and we memorized them. And then we would do all the work that we had to do, but the singing just seemed to make everything go faster and more pleasantly. So now Linda Lichter, in Simple Social Graces, like I said, this book is not for everyone, especially not for young children. Okay, but it does give a very honest view of history compared to an honest view of the moderns after the, let's say, 1900s on. She shows how they broke down and they smashed the Victorian values, including some of their houses and their horse carriages and other ways of life, to bring in the modernization, automized era, and how it changed the way that they looked at life. And of course, there were good people and bad people during Victorian times, and she is quite scathingly critical of the bad ones, and because her whole book is about the home. How did the home stay together as it did? And it says here, From Home to the World, page 211. And she says the very same thing that many of us said when we were growing up. And of course, this book was written in the 1990s, but it was the same that we used to say. And that was that your manners and your maturity and the way you treat people and the way that you treat your finances and the honesty that you have and the way that you tend to yourself and to your house and your neatness and your habits and everything begin in the home. You're treating everybody in the home that way with courtesy, and then you take it to the world. But she shows in this chapter here how the moderns deliberately twisted it and brought it from, bring the stress to the home. And anyway, from the home to the world. When home provided a refuge from the world, it was also the axis on which the world turned and which kept it from spinning out of control. She's using figures of speech here. The influential editor Sarah Josepha Hale argued in 1868, the moral tone of a people must depend upon their domestic institutions. And domestic institutions means the home and the things that help the home function. In her autobiography, the suffragist Mary Livermore echoed these sentiments when she linked the success of her crusade for women's civic rights to their role as in the domestic realm. The real humanizing and civilizing of the world is carried forward in homes, and as the aggregate of these may be, so will the nation be. One thing you have to consider is that every president and world leader comes from a home at first, we think, unless of course they've been put in institutions to raise them with a certain thinking. This is another Victorian lesson we have relearned through the harshest possible means, by encountering an explosion of amoral young predators raised in, quote, homes, unquote, that parody the meaning that once aired this word. So she's going to explain that now. In retrospect, Frances Willard, president of the Women's Christian Temperance Union, may sound hyperbolic in her description of home as the citadel of everything that is good and pure on earth. But the Victorians applied their superlatives to what they valued most for both its personal and public rewards. And here's a quote. This is what they believed. The family home, carrying on its proper work, is no narrow circle of selfish exclusiveness. There are people today that will say if you're homeschooling, your children are just being brought up in a narrow world, in a narrow life. That's not true, because if it is, their narrowness, our narrowness, and my narrowness is a great influence on the world. and but it's just words. But a living center, attracting to itself and widely radiating healthy social life. Well, part of the healthy social life was what I was talking about in the previous video, where courtship and friendship and socializing was done on the front porch instead of somewhere away from home. Its influence, the home's influence, is felt in intercourse with all classes. Although home may have been the ultimate private domain, it was as omnipresent as oxygen, the one institution that bridged the realms of personal identity and social stability. Men fought wars for God and country, but even in this God-fearing age, home was the linchpin of life. As the sartorial innovator Amelia Bloomer, who popularized bloomers, wrote during the 1850s in her women's rights journal, The Lily, without home, without the domestic relations, the love, the cares, the responsibilities which bind men's hearts to one's treasury of precious things, the world would be chaos, without order or beauty, without patriotism or social regulation, without public or private virtue. To the Victorians, the primacy of home was accepted by men as well as women. In fact, even men viewed the home as the best barometer of a nation's strength. In love of home, the love of country has its rise, declared Charles Dickens in The Old Curiosity Shop. That's another book we need to talk about, because to me it is a story that is as good today as it was then, warning people about the folly of getting into about not being careful with our finances and with our responsibilities, and how one man could lose everything and endanger his granddaughter's life. And no country nurtured this bond more than the United States, as de Tocqueville attested in Democracy in America. He said, "Whereas the European tries to escape his sorrows at home by troubling society," and this is coming to be this way, where home becomes, remember in Wives and Daughters, and Osborne said, home has become a place of unpleasantness and stress. So, as the European tries to escape his sorrows at home by troubling society, and we find many people, and young people especially, they don't like the restrictions at home, or they don't understand the protection of the home. They're not really restrictions at home. They're protections. They're great. Want to go out where they're not protected and go out and be free thinkers in the world and disturb the populace. At home by troubling society, the American derives from his home the love of order, which he carries over into the affairs of state. And that is 3/4 or 9/10 of the problem in our modern congresses today, whatever country you're in, is these people all come from homes, and many of them lack the nobility, and I'm talking about character nobility, where whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are noble, from Philippians 4:8. That's another word that we could explore, is noble and nobility, because it's a character quality, and it's related to the nobles of old, or some kind of royalty, but God pulled it into the royalty of the heart, the royal heart. And that reminds me of a nice movie I saw. It was called Royal Hearts, and I really enjoyed that. Today's impoverished debate over family values attests to how much we have lost since then. Our ancestors believed in building a house from the foundation up, not from the roof down. Neither family-friendly legislation nor cloning Martha Stewart will accomplish what needs to be done. In 1852, Dr. Blackwell warned that any country where the family was degraded, not cherished as the precious center of the national welfare, was doomed to rapid dissolution. And that reminds me of a family I know where a mother and her children were, know quite how to describe it, but it might happen to you as a homeschooler, where you're ignored and left out of things while someone befriends your children, and so her whole life was kind of broken up because her children, as they got older, gravitated toward other people, and they always ignored the mother. She never got invited. She never got included, nor was she ever consulted as to what her authority would say as an authority. She was never treated as an authority, and there's this lack of respect and honor to the parents that they find hard to battle because they are all alone. The path that led us to the place we live now, where liberals and conservatives serve up competing nostrums from workplace flex time and daycare to tax code tinkering and tougher divorce laws, we must retrace our steps and understand our missteps if we are ever to rediscover the road not taken. This is a pretty heavy book. You'd have to really think about this. Stop and read a paragraph and just think about it, because it's very deep. It's very difficult. She did not get the acclaim she deserved for writing that book. That's just an amazing book. Now, some things in it, maybe the history is not quite what I see it as, but still her main message was that we have to strengthen the home. And isn't that what Titus 2 says, that the older women should teach the younger women to love their husbands, love their children, guide the home, guard the home. And a lot of Titus 2 teachers will just focus on loving your husband, and they'll get into submission and they'll pound that into people, but they'll forget about guide the home and guard the home. The power belongs to the woman of the home, and that is not emphasized near enough. Guarding your children, you got to guard your husband too, because people will take advantage of them. They also could be listening to things that are very misleading and discouraging, so you've got to keep them encouraged. And so you are obligated to guide and guard the home. There's nothing wrong with you if you object to something that's going on, that it's affecting your home. So I don't want to get off on that, but now I want to read a little bit from this book here, Stepping Heavenward. Now, I've read so far, I'm kind of skipping around here, but I want to read things that are pertinent to what I'm talking about. And this is grown from a girl who starts out having I don't want to call it a quarrel, but just an uneasiness between her and her mother. And her mother seems to be cross with her, and she feels like her mother's picking on her, and so she enters it all in this diary. But her character becomes more refined. We've heard about, smoothing off the rough edges or something, and how a diamond is rough at first, but as it's refined, it becomes shiny. And how to refine oil, and how to you take the dross out of it, you take the dirt out of it. That's how you refine. You take the bad stuff out and you leave the pure stuff there. So she became acquainted with a young doctor who she thought was old because he was so serious, and he didn't dress like other people. He was more formal. And you'll find this same thing. I told you before, you can get this on YouTube for free, Princess Cut, and you can watch it and write down some things. And one of the things we noticed about the two characters that they put in there was one was more refined than the other and more formal. And at first you're thinking, oh my goodness, how could this man ever be? But the formal guy ended up being the one that was more precise about wanting to do what's right. And so anyway, she meets this doctor, which is often in and out of her life, since she helps her aunt take care of sick children. She helps another relative with sick children, and as she grows, she's possibly 15 or 16, and she grows into her 20s. And this Dr. Elliot, she didn't like him very much because she is a girl that goes all the way with a thought, and what is it that Emma told Harriet in Emma? You take an idea and you run wild with it. Well, this woman was the same way. This young woman was the same way. She'd take an idea, she'd take a dislike to someone, she'd label them and misjudge them, and this doctor was brave enough sometimes to tell her that what she had believed wasn't quite the truth. And so I wanted to read a little bit more about what happened with him. He has asked her mother to go and visit some children who have a child who has been in an accident that he's treating. And that was in the day when doctors used to make house call. And I still remember, some of you vital people, there were doctors that were still there on the very end of that era making house calls. Yes, and we had some. That was interesting. And so now I want to read about more of her confrontation with Dr. Elliot, who happens to be much younger than she realizes, but her mother and another older woman in her sphere of influence starts to talk to her about this, because apparently Dr. Elliot sees her as maybe a future wife, but she doesn't seem to be very interested. And so on December 22, and I believe this was probably 1835 or so forth, this book was written in diary form, which makes it real interesting. I'd love to write a story in diary form and then, do my life right. write a pretend diary of how I really should have lived. And that's what a lot of authors do. I know of one author, years ago I read about her. I couldn't remember her name, but I read about her, and she said that she'd had a lot of disappointments in her life, and so she wanted to write stories that ended up properly. And so this is a fictional story written to help young girls dwell on good character and learn not to misjudge people. So I have been to see Mrs. Embury today. She did not receive me as cordially as usual, and I very soon resolved to come away. Now, I might have read this to you before, but it's interesting that these older women were good about taking her aside and saying, don't act like that, don't do this, don't be rude to Dr. Elliot, and other things that they saw in her. Today, I think there's a problem in that is everything's done outside of the home, so young people gravitate towards other young people and they hang around in coffee shops with other single girls their age, and they get no wisdom out of that. And so if you want wisdom, now of course that's not to say that every older woman has any wisdom. Yeah, you've got to be very selective about that too. Remember that a lot of people my age grew up in an era that was far removed from the Victorian era, and the 1950s were not so fabulous in some ways. For instance, as I told you last time, they took courtship off of the front porch and put it in a car, and that got it away from the home and got it away from the family. So she said, "Would you mind my speaking to you on a certain subject?" I felt myself flush up. "I do not want to meddle with affairs that don't concern me," Mrs. Embury went on, "but Dr. Elliot and I have been good friends all of our lives, and his disappointment has really distressed me." One of my moods came on, and I couldn't speak a word. "You are not at all the sort of girl I supposed he would fancy," she continued. "He has always said he was waiting to find someone just like his mother, and she is one of the gentlest, meekest, sweetest, and fairest among women." "You ought to rejoice, then, that he has escaped my snare," I said in a husky voice, "and is free to marry his ideal where he finds her." "But that's just what troubles me, my dear. He is not free. He does not attach himself readily, and I am afraid that it will be a long, long time before he gets over this unlucky passion for you." "Passion!" I cried contemptuously. She looked at me with some surprise, and then went on. Most girls would jump at the chance of getting such a husband. I don't know that I particularly care to be classed with most girls, I replied loftily. But if you only knew him as well as I do, he is so noble, so disinterested, and he is so beloved by his patients. I could tell you scores of anecdotes about him that would show you just what he really is. See, she's trying to explain this man's true worth to this girl who only sees the surface. Thank you, I said. I think we have discussed Dr. Elliot quite enough already. I cannot say that he has elevated himself, in my opinion, by making you take up the cudgels in his defense. You do him injustice when you say that, she cried. Was this ever made into a play? That'd be so much fun to do this in the home. I think this chapter might be a fun one to do. His sister, the only person to whom he confided the state of things, begged me to find out from you, if I could, whether you had any other attachments, and if her brother's case was quite hopeless. But I am sorry I undertook the task, as it has annoyed you so much. I came away with a good deal feeling ruffled. When I got home, Mother said she was glad I had been out at last for a little recreation, and that she wished I did not confine myself so much to the children. I said I did not confine myself more than Auntie did. But that is different, Mother objected. She is her own mother, and love helps her to bear her burden. So it does me, I returned. I love the children exactly as if they were my own. That, replied my mother, is impossible. I certainly do, I persisted. Mother would not dispute with me, though I wished she would. A mother, she went on, receives her children one at a time and gradually adjusts herself to gradually increasing burdens. But you take a whole houseful on you all at once, and I'm sure it is too much for you. You do not look or act like yourself. It isn't the children, I said. Well, what is it then? Oh, it's nothing, I said pettishly. I must say, my dear, Mother said, without noticing my manner, that your wonderful devotion to her children, aside from its effect on your health and temper, has given me great delight. Well, I don't see why, I said. Very few girls your age would give up their whole time, as you do, to such work. She's looking after her aunt's children. That is because very few girls are as fond of children as I am. There is no virtue in doing exactly what one likes best to do. There, go away, you contrary child, said Mother, laughing. If you won't be praised, you won't. So I came up here and moped a little. I don't see what ails me. But there is an undercurrent of peace that is not entirely disturbed by any outside event. In spite of my follies and my shortcomings, I do believe that God loves and pities me, and will perfect that which concerns me. It is a great mystery, but so is everything. So, then Dr. Elliot went to Mrs. Crofton and said, And now, my dear friend, having issued my usual bulletin of health, you may feel quite at ease about your dear children. I guess that's her aunt. And I come to a point in your letter which I would gladly pass over in silence, but this would be but a poor return for the interest you express in my affairs. Both ladies are devoted to your little flock, and Miss Mortimer, that would be Kate, the one it's in the diary, seems not to have thought but for them. The high opinion I formed of her at the outset is more than justified by all I see of her daily household life. I know what her faults are, for she seems to take delight in revealing them, but I also know her rare virtues, and what a wealth of affection she has to bestow on the man who is so happy to win her heart. But I shall never be that man, I know. Her growing aversion to me makes me dread a summons to your house, and I have hardly manliness enough to conceal the pain it gives me. I entreat you, therefore, never again to press the subject on me. After all, I would not, if I could, dispense of the ministry of disappointment and unrest. The ministry of disappointment. Mrs. Crofton replies, So she hates you, does she? I am charmed to hear it. Indifference would be an alarming symptom, but good cordial hatred, or what looks like it, is a most hopeful sign. The next chance you get to see her alone, assure her that you shall never repeat your first offense. If nothing comes of it, I am not a woman and never was one, nor is she. It does end well, but there was a time, and even recently, where people thought that a hostile reaction to something was better than a just a neutral reaction. That hostile people were more likely to be sincere and to have their minds changed about something. They would be just as passionate about the new change as they were about the old. And they get it from Revelations, where it talks about this congregation of the Lord's church that God said, "I know you well. You are neither hot nor cold, and for that reason I shall spew you out of my mouth." And Mr. S often talks about being on a hot day and you need a drink of cold water, and somebody hands you a lukewarm glass of water and you drink it, you spit it out. And so that's what these kind of what did we call them? Did we call them milk toast? What did we call the neutral person that just didn't have any opinion one way or another, or didn't have a passion for anything, passion for life? And I've forgotten what we called them, but that was more disgusting than someone who was fiercely on the other side or fiercely against something and got it all wrong. So now let's just keep continuing here. I am half an hour into this, and if you've got something you need to do, please go do it while you listen. So I want to go into this little movie here, Princess Cut, which is really a faith-based movie designed to help people to see how something could be done the right way instead of the modern dating. And also, it was good to show how you can't trust your feelings. When your feelings are engaged in something, sometimes your heart doesn't follow good sense. And this is what this movie showed. And so the first guy that was mentioned in this, now of course I want to talk about the model that I talked to you about before, how the model is, the young man goes to the parents and inquires of the girl before he attempts to get her interested. And then the parents give their go-ahead to stay under their guidance, but get to know the whole family, the daughter in the context of the whole family in the home. But what some people will misunderstand about the whole thing is there's more to the model than just getting the parents' approval and having it home-based. There's more to that. The young man cannot assume that if he got the parents' approval and he agreed to a home-based, family-based courtship, that he would be the right one. See, a lot of people think, well, I asked and then they turned me down. There are other things that have to come into play. And remember, in this movie, the father, the mother walked in on the father in his office, and he was reading a book that his minister had given him about the qualities of a young man to be a husband, and it was things like able to earn a living and able to understand his wife's needs and things like that. And you can watch the movie and get that list. And so these suitors, you can't just assume you're just going to go to a parent and, well, I asked the parents, and then just go start taking their daughter out on dates, because there's more to it than just the place. There's more to it than just the parents. You have to be qualified in other ways, other respects too. You can't have bad habits. You can't have an arrogant attitude. All these things come into play. It still has to be the right person. And so when we see the first character, there were several other young men in it, but one of the characters that they focus on is one of the wrong characters, one of the wrong people that come in, and he doesn't care about what the parents want. The parents want him to come in and sit down and talk and, have them coffee together, and he says, no, I was just going to go around. I was just on my way to the coffee shop or the ice cream shop, and I wanted to know if Grace wanted to go with me. And they just kind of take it out from under the parents when the parents have invited him in, and he doesn't have any respect for the father. I mean, he's friendly and everything. He isn't rude, but you'll notice that in the film. But when the other man comes along, after she's been told by her parents, she kind of has a meltdown, and she says, I'm just so tired of it. The dating scene is really bad, and nobody's faithful and all this stuff. So after they convince her to just forget about it, let God take care of it, and stay home, the man that goes to the parents, he's observed her working in the garden, helping her mother in the kitchen, and going to visit the shut-ins, and riding bikes with her brother, and playing games at night with the family. He's observed all this, and he comes to the father first. He says, I don't know how to start this, and I want to make my intentions clear before I talk to your daughter. And he says, it's about your daughter, and would you be interested in allowing me to get acquainted with her with the idea of marriage in mind? Now, none of the other boys, whenever Grace mentions marriage, they say, oh, marriage? Well, maybe someday if I meet the right one. And here they are going out with her, And so it's really important when you sit down to watch this movie, you get a piece of paper and make some notes about the wrong guy and the good guy. And the one that came into her life went to her parents first, but he had other qualifications. Yes, that's a major hint if he will go to the father first. Whether he writes a letter to him or goes and visits him, that is a major sign, you might say. However, it isn't the only one. He still has to qualify. And there are many things that have to be ironed out, and the parents can discuss it with him. And he was willing to take any kind of advice from them. And he was willing to sit down with them and talk with them, whereas this other guy, I guess they called him Jared, he didn't want to come in and sit down. I don't think he ever did come in and sit down. And the father kept saying, why can't he come in and eat dinner with us, But this other man, he was willing to make it family-based and home-based. He didn't try. He never met her anywhere but in her home or with her family. And so just asking doesn't qualify you. And I'll still tell you a couple of sad situations where a young girl, homeschooled at home and everything, a young man noticed that her parents would have required permission. So he went and asked, is it okay if I court your daughter? And of course they weren't real experienced. This was a first-generation homeschool. They hadn't watched all the movies or read all the books that I read about it, or even experienced themselves, like I had. And so they said, well, yeah, I guess so. And he was a fairly decent guy. But what he did was he got their permission, and then they never saw him at their house again because he was always taking her somewhere else. And so he was always out with her and late at night and everything like that. So there has to be some kind of boundaries set about this, and there weren't in this case. And then there were other courtships that I noticed that, of course, this is our first generation trying to restore all this Victorian stuff. And it's also very biblical, too. There are other sad situations where a courtship just drags on and on and on, and the young man doesn't seem to be married, where I understand that should be the first thing that is spoken of, that I want to get to know your family better, I want to get to know your daughter better in a family setting because of marriage. Whereas I have seen really sad situations where courtship was dragged on for years and years and years. The girl was taken, quote, out of circulation, what I call it, because people just assumed they were a couple, and no one who was really qualified dared to intervene in that. And really, she needed to be rescued. And it is very sad to see that. And so the parents need to really search this out, do a lot of praying about it, and talk to their children about not going ahead without the blessings and approval of their parents. And if you do things, and you young people, if you're doing it right, your parents will encourage you. They will enable it. They will help you. They will make provision for the other person to be in your life. They will want him to be part of your life. I'm speaking about the girl, but you've got to protect your boys too. As they get older, girls in the world think they're pretty neat. Well, who wouldn't? Most of the boys from homes, especially home school boys, are very attractive and well-mannered, and who wouldn't want them as a mate? But that doesn't mean they can have them. So everybody needs to check this out. So just asking doesn't qualify you, and if it's the right thing, the parents will encourage it, and it all has to be done for the right reason. And I was talking to a young man about this not long ago, and he's not American, and he thought that that the shotgun wedding that he'd heard about in America was just a source of great amusement. And I told him a bit of history about that, and it actually comes from it actually was based on the biblical situation, that if the young girl was not being treated properly, that they should marry. And so they reckoned that it would be good to have a shotgun wedding. And we saw a scene of that in Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. And but we have a lot to discuss and a lot to think about in this respect. I probably try to remember to label this as courtship in the home, and you could probably all do a better job. But I want to read to you something about sleep, and the reason is that many of you will wake up, and now I'm finding out it's not happening to the vital people, it's happening to young people too, is they either can't get to sleep or they wake up in the night and can't get to sleep. And so I just wanted to tell you that the 8-hour thing was invented by the Industrial Revolution. 8 hours of sleep, 8 hours of work, 8 hours of play. And that was how it was justified to work for 8 hours. But we know when we were all in other, previous to this, where everything was automated, people didn't have to do that 8-hour thing. So I want to read to you called Sleep Like a Victorian. And it's from a medical site. And so I want to read that to you. And I had mentioned it to you before as from a piece of literature where an author had camped out over a Swiss village, kind of a higher hill, and noticed that at about midnight the lights all came on in this village, and people went outside and they walked their dogs, and then they stayed up a little while and drank tea and had something to eat, and then the lights would go out a couple hours later and they'd all go back to sleep and stay asleep till 8 o'clock in the morning or something like that. And it was called the second sleep. And the author researched the Bible and found out that David had mentioned the second sleep, and I believe it was in the Psalms, where he talked about the second watch and called it the second sleep, and how he would seek the Lord after the second sleep or before the second sleep, something like that, so that when they got up in the night, they would be reading their Bibles and praying, and it was a custom. But a lot of this stuff is hidden because, of course, we're all supposed to be slaves to this 8-hour thing. So if you wake up in the night, don't get anxious. I used to get really anxious, like, how am I going to manage the next day if I'm dragging around and without sleep? But you can sleep any time. If you're a homemaker, you're allowed to sleep if you want to. And I took lots of naps, but I took them on the couch so that I would be there, easily awakened, and the children would be playing at my feet or playing around on the floor or something like that. And I did take lots of naps. Sleeping like a person living in the Victorian times is the new strategy to combat sleeplessness or insomnia, it seems. Before the Industrial Revolution and rise of electricity, most people would go to bed when it got dark. I have really enjoyed Brian Kozlowski's book, the Jane Austen Diet, where he talked about how the Regency period people did go to bed at dark, or they did burn candles, but it was cheaper just to go to bed. You still had to buy the lights, and how they went to bed when it got dark. And I have been practicing that, and it's a bit strange, but I'm feeling really good. And if you can do that, the best way to do it is to make yourself get up extremely early one day so that you'll be ready to go to bed by, really early. And I don't want to say how early it is, but sometimes it's quite early. They would sleep for around 5 hours and then wake up. The next hour or so would be dedicated to chores around the house, reading, relaxing. And then the people would settle down for a second round of sleep. Insomnia, or problems with sleep, generally manifests as difficulty falling asleep or maintaining a restful sleep throughout the night. While some find it difficult to fall asleep until the wee hours of the morning, yet others have difficulty getting back to sleep after they have woken up in the middle of the night, due to a light sleep or due to a full bladder that necessitates getting up. In many of these individuals who wake up, say around 2 or 3 a.m., going back to sleep is difficult. The second sleep comes in them just before morning, and they wake up not feeling rested late morning. This two-part sleep is now perceived as a sleep problem. It really shouldn't be a sleep problem. I believe that work should be done so you can get it done. Not that you've put in so many hours, but you just get the work done. And that's the trouble with modern workplaces, is they go by the hour rather than on the jobs getting done. And I noticed when I was young, I went to work for a little while to help somebody out in an office while they were trying to hire somebody else. And I noticed that people had to look at the clock. They finished their work quite early, but they had to stay there. That is so sad. According to statistics from National Bed Month this March, only 1 in 5 individuals gets a complete night's sleep. So, it talks about the 2 phases of sleep being normal. Each of the phases has different functions. They can each individually help consolidate memories, process the events of the day, and help repair processes of the body. Sleep is the most rejuvenating thing. It's like a vitamin. And it heals the body, it heals the mind, it even improves people who are discouraged or depressed. It's so good for you. Researchers suggest that the gap between the first and second sleep can be an hour or less. During this time, it is wise not to look up at any screen. The blue light from the screen kills the sleep and wakens the brain. It is best to bore the brain, so to speak, during this time by getting up, reading a slow-paced book, listening to music until the brain is ready for the next installment of sleep. Once this break is an accepted pattern, insomniacs tend to return to sleeping restfully the rest of the night and wake up feeling refreshed. It says regular physical activity during the day can stimulate sleep at night, say experts, and I suppose housework would be that. Now, as far as exercise, I don't like to call it exercise. I'll just type in stretches for whatever it is I need. You can even get a stretch for sleep and try that. Brain activity, including books, learning new languages, crosswords, riddles at night instead of smartphone or a laptop, is a good thing to do before sleep. Taking up new hobbies or brain activities can relax the brain at bedtime. Mindful practices to calm the brain. Aromas that induce good sleep include lavender. Sleep-friendly bedrooms, and I always like to have good natural bedding. A healthy diet free from caffeine and alcohol can help sleep. Zinc and magnesium can help, and other supplements. There are lots of articles on this Victorian sleep, or pre-industrial sleep they called it. If you want to look that up and search that out, you might get some help if you want to sleep. But what we need to do is forget about sleeping a full 8 hours at a time. Even babies don't do that, and sleep like a baby. It doesn't hurt to get up, and it doesn't hurt to give up sleeping. I like to read. If I wake up, it gives me a chance to read, and I don't have to work. So it's really fun to lay there in bed, turn the light on, and read a little bit, which I couldn't get away with during the day if the house is a wreck. But one of the reasons I love going to bed so early is my work stops. I don't find more to do, and I'm not just running till I drop. So, ladies, I hope that I also oh, wait a minute, there was one more thing, so let me find it. And it was called The Elders in the Bible. And I wanted to bring this up because elders had a requirement. There was a list of things, that qualifications for them, and it was in 1 Timothy chapter 3, and it was all about what the elders must be like. They couldn't be drunkards. They had to be above reproach, sober-minded, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not violent but gentle, not quarrelsome, not a lover of money, managing his own household well with all dignity. And for if he cannot manage his own household, how will he care for the church of God? He must not be a recent convert, and he must not be puffed, lest he become puffed up with conceit. He must be well thought of by outsiders, so that he may not fall into disgrace, into the snare of the devil. He must be dignified, not double-tongued, not addicted to much wine, not greedy for dishonest gain. And so, and that's 1 Timothy chapter 3. And the reason I'm reading it to you, I'll tell you. So here are the qualifications. Blameless, as a steward of God, above reproach, faithful to husband to his wife, temperate, sober, vigilant, sober-minded, prudent, of good behavior, orderly, respectable, given to hospitality, able to teach, etc., and everything that I've read to you. Okay, so it's just like in when I'm talking about widows and being keepers at home, and so that they don't go from house to house and meddle with other people's business, and how being at home is not enough. You can be located here but still be mentally gone into other interests. And it doesn't even have to be meddling with other people's lives. You just get involved in other interests. There's so much that you can be interested in, and pretty soon you've neglected your children, you neglected your house, and you're airheaded, and your brain is spinning, you don't know what happened. So I was reading about the command to young widows and anticipating that somebody would say, oh, but that's just for widows. I can, and I'm particularly talking about young single girls at home. That's just for widows. It's not for me. I can do this and do that because I'm not married. But so I was trying to say, if it's a good quality character thing, whether it's to widows or not, it's a good thing to adapt. And they were to be sober-minded and at home and focusing on homekeeping. And if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for us. And if you're young, it doesn't matter whether you're a widow or not. It just means you're not married, and you can still follow those rules. Well, it's the same with elders. A man may not ever be an elder. A young man may not ever be an elder. But if you've got a young man at home, and he's thinking about some of these things about being a qualified husband, it's the same qualifications as being an elder. So we could all these young men could aspire to have the qualifications of an elder. Doesn't mean they have to be an elder. Doesn't mean they are old enough to be an elder. But what's wrong with acquiring some of these? Blameless as a steward of God, temperate, sober, vigilant, sober-minded, prudent, of good behavior, orderly, respectable, given to hospitality, able to teach. To aspire to learn to do all those things, it wouldn't hurt, would it? And so we can't go around. This is what young people will do when they're trying to get around the family courtship plans and the parents' authority. Is they will tweak it a little bit and try to get away with it, and try to change the whole pattern. And they'll say, well, I'm at home, and I have my parents' blessing. But they may have just changed it around to get it to do things their way. And so to avoid the heartache and the heartbreak of the modern way of doing things, young people, stay home, because I want to go into that maybe in a future video about the advantage of staying home, because you'll avoid poverty, you'll avoid false friends, you'll avoid loneliness, you'll avoid a feeling of lack of belonging that many people have. And that there are so many, now I noticed a lot of movies that are coming up with the independent type movies where young people have quit their independent lifestyle and come back home to their hometown or the farm and pick up their life there and live happily ever after. And it's good, and we can restore a lot of this. The Bible encourages people to restore God's word in their life. And so, ladies, I hope that this has been helpful for you that are looking for this kind of thing, and that you will read some of these books that I have mentioned, and that you got a lot done. And until I see you next time, stay close to Jesus. I'll talk to you later. Bye.